She only wanted to eat the leftovers. But what happened next became the beginning of something no one, not even she, could have imagined. The humid morning heat had already spread through the streets of Riverdale when the first customers began arriving at the People's Kitchen. The unmistakable smell of salt-cured beef in butter mingled with the aroma of fresh cilantro and sautéed garlic, escaping through the kitchen windows and invading the sidewalk like a silent invitation. It was 7 in the morning on a busy Saturday, and Mr. Anthony, the doorman of the neighboring building, was the first to occupy one of the tables on the sidewalk. Soon after, Ms. Candy arrived, a secretary from the government office, followed by a group of construction workers from the site across the street. The buzz increased as the clock moved forward. Waiters balanced full trays, while Sam, the cashier, received crumpled bills and sweaty coins. In the kitchen, Mrs. Nancy commanded her helpers with the precision of a conductor. Her seasoning was famous throughout the city, and for many workers, this was the only place where they could eat a complete meal without compromising their tight monthly budget. Across the street, sitting on a low wall, Lily observed everything with attentive eyes. She was 12 years old, with sunburned skin and curly hair stuck to her forehead with sweat. Her bare feet, calloused by the roughness of the streets, swung in the slow rhythm of waiting. It was the 4th consecutive day she had been there, analyzing the movement, counting customers, studying the times of greater and lesser flow, like a small strategist on a secret mission. Nobody seemed to notice her presence. She was used to that. Invisibility was a skill she had learned early on. Sometimes being invisible was the best protection. Other times, it was the most painful of solitudes. Lily didn't beg, didn't sell candy, didn't approach anyone. She just observed, waiting for the right moment to act. Inside the restaurant, Oliver organized the accounts from the previous day. He was 47 years old, with grey hair at his temples and a posture that revealed more than his current occupation as the manager of that establishment. His eyes, a deep brown, carried a serenity that is only acquired after many internal storms. To the employees and customers, he was just the efficient administrator who had transformed the People's Kitchen into the best popular restaurant in the region. No one there suspected that those hands, now accustomed to counting change and organizing work schedules, had once signed million-dollar contracts. Oliver observed the growing movement on the sidewalk through the window. That's when he noticed for the first time the girl on the wall. Something about her caught his attention. Maybe it was the way her eyes scanned every detail of the restaurant, or maybe it was the determined quietness with which she remained there, different from the other children who usually circulated in the area. "Mr. Oliver, there's a problem in the kitchen," called Clayton, interrupting his thoughts. "The fryer is leaking oil again." The rest of the day passed in the usual hustle and bustle. Oliver barely had time to look out at the street again. When he finally got a moment of pause, it was already past 5 in the afternoon, and the girl had disappeared. The next morning, Sunday, the movement was even greater. Entire families arrived for the traditional lunch, forming lines that extended along the sidewalk, and there she was again in the same place, with the same attentive eyes. Oliver observed her discreetly while organizing the tables outside. Today she wore a faded blue t-shirt, 2 sizes too big for her, and the same worn shorts from the day before. It was at the end of that afternoon, when the movement had already decreased, that Oliver saw her approach. The girl crossed the street with cautious but determined steps. She didn't head to the main entrance but circled the building to the back door, where suppliers usually delivered goods. She stopped there by the support counter and waited to be noticed. Oliver, who was supervising the kitchen cleaning, was the first to see her. He approached, curious. "Hi," he said with a calm voice. "Do you need something?" The girl didn't respond immediately. Her eyes quickly scanned the interior of the kitchen, stopping at the pile of dirty dishes accumulating in the sink. Then she looked back at Oliver. "Can I wash those dishes in exchange for a plate of food?" she asked, with a surprisingly firm voice for someone so young. The question caught Oliver off guard. It wasn't a request for charity. It was a proposal of exchange, of work for dignity. Something inside him moved, as if a door long closed had suddenly been opened. "What's your name?" he asked, after a moment of silence. "Lily," she answered, without averting her gaze. "Well, Lily, I think we already have someone washing the dishes today," replied Oliver, observing the girl's reaction. For an instant, He saw a flash of disappointment cross her eyes before she nodded slightly, ready to move away. "But," he continued, "we need someone to organize the stockroom. It's lighter and cleaner work. Are you interested?" Lily studied his face, as if looking for signs of deception or ill intention. She found only a respectful seriousness that treated her not as a begging child, but as someone capable of a genuine contribution. "I'm interested," she replied simply. Oliver led her to the pantry at the back of the restaurant. It was an organized space, but one that needed constant attention due to the intense movement of the kitchen. "Here we store the dry ingredients. We need to separate the beans by type, organize the flours and catalog the spices that arrived yesterday," he explained, showing her the shelves. "Can you do that?" Lily nodded, already analyzing the packages. "When you're done, you can go to the kitchen. Mrs. Nancy will set aside a plate for you," added Oliver, observing how the girl was already working methodically, without wasting movements or words. As he returned to the front of the restaurant, Oliver felt a weight in his chest. The girl's phrase had awakened memories in him that he thought were forgotten. His grandmother, Mrs. Josephine, washing clothes for others when he was a child, refusing to accept any help that wasn't in exchange for her work. "Dignity isn't given, my son. It's earned," she would say. And now, almost 4 decades later, a street girl was teaching him the same lesson. In the kitchen, Oliver approached Mrs. Nancy, the head cook who had worked there since the restaurant's opening. "Nancy, there's a girl organizing the stockroom. When she's done, please serve a full plate for her, a good one." The cook raised an eyebrow but didn't question. She knew Oliver well enough to know that he didn't make decisions without reason. 2 hours later, when the sun had already set, Lily emerged from the pantry. She had organized not only what had been asked of her, but had also reordered the shelves of canned goods and made a small inventory on a piece of paper she had found. She approached the kitchen counter timidly, where Mrs. Nancy was finalizing the day's last preparations. "I'm finished," she announced in a low voice. Nancy looked at the girl over her glasses. There was something familiar in that silent determination, something that reminded her of her own childhood in rural Pennsylvania. "Sit over there," she pointed to a small bench in the corner of the kitchen. "I'll serve you right away." While Lily ate with the concentration of someone who knows how to value every forkful, Oliver observed her discreetly through the office window. There was something about that girl, a strength that contrasted with her apparent fragility, a dignity that the streets had not been able to erase. "Mr. Oliver, we're closing," announced Sam, the cashier, interrupting his thoughts. "Do you need anything else?" "No, you can go. See you tomorrow." When the last employee left, Oliver returned to the kitchen. Lily had finished eating and was washing her own plate in the sink. "Did you like the food?" he asked. "Best I've ever had," she replied, honestly. Then she hesitated for a moment before asking, "Can I come back tomorrow?" The question hung in the air between them. It wasn't just about work or food. It was about belonging, about having a place to return to. "Of course you can," replied Oliver, surprising himself with his own certainty. "We open at 6. Lily nodded, put the clean plate in the drainer, and headed for the back door. Before leaving, she turned around one last time. "Thank you," she said, with a simplicity that carried the weight of someone who rarely had reasons to be thankful. When she disappeared into the darkness of the street, Oliver remained standing for a long time. Something had changed that Sunday, something he couldn't name but that he felt as a small light turning on in a place that had been dark for a long time, as if that child, with her simple and direct proposal, had found a breach in his carefully constructed armor. And through that breach, an old purpose began to infiltrate again. Oliver closed the restaurant and walked to his small apartment 2 blocks away. On the way, for the first time in a long time, he didn't think about spreadsheets, suppliers, or financial statements. He thought only about the question that echoed in his mind. Where is she going now? And how different tomorrow would be for both of them in just a few hours. If this story has interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching from, and we'll continue. The clock had not yet struck 6 in the morning when Lily arrived at the People's Kitchen. The street was quiet, with only occasional cars passing by and the first street vendors setting up their stalls. The sky, still transitioning from dark blue to the orange hue of dawn, spread a soft light over the city. She had spent the night under the awning of a closed store 3 blocks away, using her worn backpack as a pillow and a piece of cardboard as a mattress. Lily approached the back door of the restaurant and waited. Her stomach growled, but it wasn't just hunger she felt. It was a different kind of anxiety, an expectation she hadn't experienced in a long time. A few minutes later, she heard the sound of keys and the door opened. It was Clayton, the kitchen assistant, a thin man in his early 20s, who always arrived first to light the stoves and prepare the first pots of coffee. "Whoa, girl, you scared me. What are you doing here so early?" he asked, surprised by Lily's presence. "Mr. Oliver said I could come back today. I came to work," she replied, with the same seriousness as the day before. Clayton hesitated for a moment, but ended up shrugging and opening the door wider. "Come in then. It's cold out there." Lily entered the kitchen, which was gradually coming to life. The fluorescent lights were turned on. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the room, and the metallic sound of pans being positioned on the stoves created a kind of familiar melody. She stayed in a corner observing the morning routine until Oliver arrived about half an hour later. "Good morning, Lily," he greeted, showing no surprise, as if he had already expected to find her there. "Did you sleep well?" The question was simple but loaded with meaning. Lily just nodded slightly, avoiding prolonging that subject. "Come with me," said Oliver, leading her to the office. There he opened a small closet and took out a clean apron. "Today you're going to help Mrs. Nancy in the kitchen. She'll teach you how everything works around here." Lily took the apron, which looked more like a dress on her small body, and tied it at her waist with determination. Oliver noticed that she was wearing the same clothes as the day before, but had tried to clean herself up. Her hair was damp, probably washed in some public bathroom, and her face had been carefully scrubbed, although it still had stains of dirt in the less accessible corners. "Before we start, let's have breakfast," he invited. "Clayton always makes more than we need anyway." In the small employee break room, Oliver served a glass of coffee with milk and set aside some buttered bread for Lily. He observed how she ate slowly, savoring each piece, unlike children her age he usually saw, always hurried and distracted. "How old are you again, Lily?" he asked, trying to start a conversation. 12, she replied, between one bite and another. "And do you go to school?" A brief silence before the answer. "I used to, at James Adams Elementary School, but it's been a while since I went." Oliver nodded without pressing. There was time for that conversation. For now, the important thing was that she was there, safe and fed. After breakfast, Lily was officially introduced to Mrs. Nancy. The cook was almost 60 years old, with grey hair always tied in a firm bun and hands calloused by decades of work. Her face, marked by deep wrinkles, carried the severity of someone who had faced many difficulties, but her eyes had a welcoming sparkle that few noticed at first glance. "So you're the girl who organized my pantry," said Nancy, looking Lily up and down. "You did a good job. Now let's see if you can learn to use what's in there." This is how Lily's introduction to the world of the people's kitchen began. Nancy was rigorous but patient. She showed the girl how to prepare vegetables, the correct way to wash them, how to separate the usable parts from those that would go to the trash. Lily absorbed each instruction with silent attention, her eyes following the cook's precise movements, as if memorizing a vital choreography. "Never waste anything," Nancy explained, as she transformed potato and carrot peels into seasoning for the broth. In the kitchen, as in life, everything has its value and its moment. The morning advanced quickly. The restaurant opened its doors, and the usual buzz took over the environment. Lily remained in the kitchen, helping with the simpler tasks, always under Nancy's watchful eye. When the movement increased around noon, her services were also requested in the dining room. Sam, the cashier, taught her how to organize trays and cutlery for customers. "You're smart, girl," he commented, seeing how Lily quickly memorized the correct arrangement of items. "You've got a future." Around 3 in the afternoon, when the flow of customers decreased, Lily finally sat down to have lunch. Mrs. Nancy had set aside a special plate for her, with an extra portion of salt-cured meat, her culinary pride. While eating, the girl observed the movement in the dining room. There was something comforting about that environment, in the well-established routine, in the clear purpose of each person there. "Do you like the food?" Lily looked up and found Oliver standing beside her, with a genuinely interested expression. "It's very good," she replied honestly. Mrs. Nancy cooks better than my mom, but don't tell her I said that. It was the first time Oliver saw her almost smile, a slight curving of the lips that disappeared as quickly as it appeared, but that revealed a glimpse of the child behind that serious facade. "Does your mum live here in Riverdale?" he asked, trying not to seem invasive. Lily looked away, suddenly focused on her plate. "She used to, we had a falling out." And then, changing the subject, "Can I help clean the tables when I'm done here?" Oliver noticed the evasion, but respected it. "Of course you can. Joe will show you how to do it." During the rest of the afternoon, Lily continued assisting with the restaurant tasks. Her presence, initially strange to the other employees, was gradually being accepted as part of the routine. There was something in the seriousness with which she worked, in the silent efficiency of her movements, that inspired respect even from the most distrustful. When the restaurant closed, it was already past 9 at night. Lily had worked all day, with only small breaks for rest. Her legs ached and her arms felt the weight of the trays she had carried, but there was a different satisfaction in her eyes. The fatigue of work was different from the fatigue of the street. It was a fatigue that brought dignity. In the kitchen, while helping to put away the last utensils, Lily felt Mrs. Nancy's gaze upon her. "You worked well today, girl," said the cook, in a tone that mixed approval and concern. "But where are you going to sleep now?" The question fell like a stone in the quiet environment of the kitchen. Lily stood still for a moment, as if caught by surprise, although she knew that question would inevitably come. "I'll manage," she replied, trying to sound more confident than she really was. Mrs. Nancy exchanged a significant look with Oliver, who was organizing the accounts at the nearby counter. It was a look that dispensed with words, loaded with a concern that both shared. "Lily," called Oliver, approaching, "we have a small room in the back, where we keep some materials. There's a mattress there that we use when the movement is very large, and someone needs to sleep here. You can stay there tonight if you want." It wasn't exactly a room, but an adapted storage area. Still, it had a door that closed, a clean mattress, and mainly security. For Lily, it was more than she had in the last few weeks. "Just for tonight?" she asked, with a vulnerability that until then she had not shown. "For now," replied Oliver, measuring his words. "We can talk more about this tomorrow." After Mrs. Nancy and the other employees left, Oliver showed Lily the small storage room. He had quickly organized the space, moving boxes and creating a cozy corner with the mattress, a pillow, and clean sheets. He also set aside a towel and indicated where the employee bathroom was. "You have everything you need here. If you need anything during the night, my number is written on this paper. Just call from that phone in the office," he explained. "Sleep well, Lily." When Oliver finally left, closing the restaurant, Lily remained sitting on the edge of the mattress for a long time. The silence of the place was different from the silence of the streets. There wasn't the distant noise of cars, the barking of dogs, or the occasional voices of night passers-by. It was a protective silence, almost cozy. She lay down slowly, feeling the softness of the mattress accommodate her tired body. How many nights had she dreamed of a place like this? Safe, clean, all hers. She closed her eyes but couldn't sleep immediately. In her mind, she replayed the events of the last few days. How had she gotten here? What would happen next? And for how long would this feeling of security last? Meanwhile, a few blocks away, Oliver also remained awake in his apartment. Sitting in the living room armchair, with a cup of now-cold tea on the side table, he reflected on the decision he had made. Taking in that girl, even temporarily, wasn't something that was in his plans. However, there was something about her that touched him deeply. Perhaps it was the dignity with which she faced her situation, or perhaps it was the reflection of his own childhood memories, when his grandmother struggled to raise 3 grandchildren alone after the premature death of her daughter. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Marlene, his sister. "You didn't call this week," she said, without beating around the bush. "The lawyers are asking about the foundation documents. We need your signature." "I'll take care of it," he replied evasively. "Oliver, when are you coming back? The company needs you. Your life is here in San Francisco, not in that backwater where you've hidden yourself." The irritation in Marlene's voice was evident. Since the death of Claire, his wife, 3 years ago, the relationship between the siblings had deteriorated. Marlene didn't understand Oliver's decision to abandon the presidency of the family's hotel chain to live anonymously in a small city. For her, it was an irresponsible escape. For him, It was the only way to find meaning to continue. "I'm not hiding, Marlene. I'm exactly where I want to be." "Doing what? Managing a second-rate restaurant?" "You have responsibilities, Oliver, to the company, to the memory of our parents, to yourself." The conversation continued in the same tone for a few minutes, until Oliver finally ended the call, promising to send the signed documents the following week. When he hung up, he felt the familiar weight of guilt and longing. Yes, he had responsibilities, but he also had the right to seek his own path, even if no one understood. That night, both Lily and Oliver slept with similar thoughts, albeit in such different contexts. Both were trying to find their place in a world that didn't seem to have been made for them. Both carried losses and sought, each in their own way, to rebuild something that had been broken inside. And in that small restaurant, in the center of Riverdale, something was beginning to form, an invisible bond woven with threads of shared loneliness and reluctant hope. A bond that, although neither of them could clearly see at that moment, would forever change the course of their lives. A week passed since Lily's arrival at the People's Kitchen. What was supposed to be a temporary arrangement was beginning to take on contours of permanence. The small storage room at the back of the restaurant had been reorganized. The stock boxes were transferred to another location. A colorful curtain was installed on the narrow window, and a small wooden chest, found in the basement, now stored the few clothes Lily owned, along with some new pieces that Mrs. Nancy had discreetly brought her. The girl's adaptation to the restaurant routine surprised everyone. Lily learned quickly and worked with an uncommon dedication for her age. Soon she was helping not only with the simpler tasks, but also learning to prepare some dishes under Mrs. Nancy's rigorous supervision. Mornings were dedicated to the kitchen and afternoons to the dining room, where her discreet presence was already familiar to regular customers. "The girl has talent," Nancy commented to Oliver, as they watched Lily carefully season a pot of beans. "She knows how to respect the time of the food, has patience. That can't be taught, it comes from within." Oliver silently agreed. There was something in Lily that went beyond her age, a maturity forced by circumstances, but also a natural sensitivity that revealed itself in small details, in the way she arranged the wildflowers she collected on her way to work and placed in glasses of water on the tables, in the care with which she separated food that could still be used, in the special attention she devoted to elderly customers. However, despite the apparent adaptation, Oliver noticed that something still troubled the girl. Sometimes he caught her looking at the street with a distant expression, or reacting with a start when someone suddenly entered the restaurant. And there were the nights. Clayton, who always arrived before dawn, commented that he often found Lily already awake, sitting on the small bench in the kitchen, as if sleep were a luxury she didn't fully allow herself. That Tuesday morning, the movement in the restaurant was calm. A light rain had been falling since dawn, discouraging more distant customers. Taking advantage of the moment of calm, Oliver called Lily for a conversation in his office. "How are you feeling here, Lily?" he asked, indicating the chair across from him. The girl sat on the edge of the seat, her hands restless on her lap. "Well," she replied simply. "Do you like working at the restaurant?" A brief affirmative nod. "And school? Do you miss it?" The question seemed to disarm her for an instant. Her eyes, always alert, lowered to her own hands. "A little," she admitted. "I liked math and reading. Miss Deborah always lent me books." Oliver nodded, trying not to show the concern he felt. A 12-year-old girl should be in school, not working full-time, no matter how happy she seemed there. "Lily, I think it's time we talked about your situation," he said, carefully choosing his words. "Do you have family? Someone who might be worried about you?" The silence that followed was long and heavy. When she finally spoke, Lily's voice came out almost as a whisper. "My mom. Her name is Julia." "And where is she now?" "I'm not sure exactly. We were living in a boarding house on Oakwood Street, but the landlady asked for the room back because we were behind on rent. My mum and I fought that day." Oliver waited, giving her space to continue. "She said she was going to try for a job in a nearby town, that she would come for me in a few days. But I got angry and left home before that. I took my backpack and left." "How long ago was that, Lily?" "Almost a month, I think." The information fell like a weight on Oliver. A month was enough time for a desperate mother to search for her daughter throughout the city, perhaps even involve the police. Unless, could your mother think you went with her, or that you're with some relative? Lily shook her head negatively. I left a note. I said I would manage on my own. Oliver sighed, processing the information. It was a delicate situation. As much as he wanted to help Lily, he couldn't simply ignore the existence of a mother who, from what he knew so far, could be desperately looking for her daughter. Lily, I think we need to find your mother, he finally said. She must be very worried. The girl's face immediately closed. I don't want to go back to the boarding house. I don't have a place there anymore. I'm not talking about you returning to a difficult situation, Oliver explained. But your mother has the right to know that you're okay, and maybe we can help both of you. Lily didn't respond immediately. Her eyes revealed an internal battle between the desire to maintain the hard-won independence and the recognition that, deep down, she missed her mother. Can I continue working here? She finally asked, even if we find my mom? The question revealed her biggest fear, losing the small, safe world she had built at the People's Kitchen. Of course you can, Oliver assured. Your place here is guaranteed. But we need to regularize your situation, Lily. You're too young to be alone. The conversation was interrupted by Clayton's arrival, announcing that the movement in the dining room had increased with the end of the rain. Lily took the opportunity to escape from the office, quickly returning to her tasks. Oliver didn't insist, knowing that he had planted an important seed. The next step would be to discover how to find Julia. The next day, Oliver talked to Henry, a lawyer who frequented the restaurant almost daily. Without revealing all the details, he explained that he was trying to locate the mother of an underage employee and asked for guidance on how to proceed legally. The ideal would be to file a police report, advised Henry. But that would involve Child Protective Services, and the girl would probably be removed from the restaurant until the situation was clarified. That wasn't what Oliver wanted. He knew Lily would interpret this as a betrayal. Is there another way? Some less official means of locating someone? Henry scratched his chin, thoughtful. Well, if you have the full name and the last known address, we can do a search in the municipal records. See if she receives any social benefit or if she's registered in any city program. It was a start. That same afternoon, Oliver discreetly obtained from Lily her mother's full name, Julia Sanders. With this information, Henry promised to start some searches. 3 days later, while lunch was being served at the People's Kitchen, a woman timidly entered through the main door. She was about 35 years old, with curly hair tied in a simple bun, and wore a faded jean skirt with a white blouse. Her eyes scanned the room, anxious, until she spotted the counter where Sam worked as a cashier. "Good morning," she said, her voice trembling with nervousness. "I'm looking for work. They said you might need someone for cleaning." Sam, accustomed to forwarding this type of request to Oliver, asked her to wait a moment. Meanwhile, on the other side of the room, Lily emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray with meals. That's when her eyes met those of the newly arrived woman. Time seemed to freeze. The tray trembled in Lily's hands, the plates dangerously rattling. For a moment it seemed like she was going to drop everything, but then, with a visible effort, she regained control and continued on her way to the table she was serving, as if nothing had happened. The woman, however, brought her hands to her mouth, her eyes instantly tearing up. "Lily," she whispered, almost inaudible in the buzz of the restaurant. Oliver, who was observing the scene from near the kitchen entrance, quickly approached. "Miss Julia?" She turned, surprised to hear her name. "Yes? I'm Oliver, the manager. Can we talk in the office?" Julia cast another glance in Lily's direction, who was now deliberately avoiding looking at the counter, and nodded, following Oliver. In the small office, Oliver offered a chair to Julia and briefly explained how Lily had arrived at the restaurant, the work she performed, and where she was sleeping. He omitted the days the girl had spent on the street before finding the People's Kitchen, judging that this information would only increase the mother's suffering. "She's fine," he assured. "She's an amazing girl, very responsible and hard-working." Tears silently ran down Julia's face as she listened. "I looked for her everywhere," she said. Her voice choked. "I went back to the boarding house after getting a job in Riverdale itself, but the landlady, Ms. Natalie, told me Lily had left with her things. She left a note saying she would manage on her own." "And what did the note say exactly?" asked Oliver, curious to better understand what had happened. "It said she was tired of seeing her mother humiliate herself to get things, that she was going to work and show that she could take care of herself," replied Julia, wiping away her tears. "But she's just a child. How was I to know she would really do that?" Oliver nodded, understanding perfectly. Lily's determination was no surprise to him. What happened between you two before she left? Julia lowered her eyes, the shame visible on her face. We were being evicted. I had lost my job at the laundry where I worked and couldn't pay the rent. I told Lily we would go to Jersey City, where a cousin had promised to get me work at a hotel. She didn't want to go, said she would lose the school year, that she had friends here. I said things I regret. I told her she didn't understand anything about life, that she was a spoiled child. Oliver could imagine the scene. A desperate mother, a frightened daughter, harsh words said in the heat of the moment. The next day, when I returned from downtown where I had gone to look for work, she was no longer there, just the note. And you didn't go to Jersey City? I went for a few days, but I couldn't stay. How could I, with my daughter missing? I came back and started looking for her. I got a temporary job as a house cleaner, rented a small room and kept searching. Until yesterday at the market, I heard 2 women commenting about a girl who worked here, who was about Lily's age. It wasn't much, but it was a lead. Oliver felt a wave of respect for that woman. Despite all the difficulties, she hadn't given up on her daughter. Ms. Julia, I think we can help both of you, he said, after a moment of reflection. Lily is happy here. She's adapted well to the work. And by coincidence, we really do need someone for the cleaning sector. Julia's eyes widened, a mixture of hope and distrust. You are offering me a job? I am. The work is honest, the salary is fair, and you'll be able to be near your daughter. As for housing, we have a small apartment upstairs that we used as storage. With some adaptations, it can become a temporary home for both of you, until you find something better. It was more than Julia could have hoped for. For a moment, she was speechless, just looking at Oliver as if trying to understand his true intentions. Why would you do this for us? You don't even know us. The question was valid. Oliver thought about his answer carefully. Because Lily is special. She brought something different to this place, to all of us, and because I believe that sometimes we just need a chance to start over. It wasn't the whole truth. There was more. The loneliness he himself felt since Claire's death, the emptiness he sought to fill by helping others, the possibility of redemption he saw in each act of kindness. But he didn't say that. Some truths are too difficult to put into words. And what about Lily? Asked Julia, concerned. She clearly doesn't want to talk to me. Give her time, advised Oliver. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But she's a smart girl. She'll understand. At that moment, a soft knock on the door interrupted the conversation. It was Mrs. Nancy. Sorry to interrupt, but there's a problem in the kitchen that only you can solve, Oliver. He nodded, excusing himself to Julia. As he left the office, he found Lily standing in the hallway, her face a rigid mask of contained emotions. What is she doing here? Asked the girl, without beating around the bush. She came looking for work, replied Oliver honestly, and found you. You called her here, didn't you? You looked for her. There was no accusation in her voice, just a painful realization. Not exactly, but when I found out that your mother might be looking for you, I helped find her. It was the right thing to do, Lily. The girl looked away, her tense shoulders revealing the internal battle she was waging. Will I have to leave with her? Go back to that boarding house? No, assured Oliver. You two can stay here if you want. There's work for your mother and a place for you to live. But the decision is yours, Lily. No one will force you to do anything. The words seemed to relieve some of the tension in her body. Still, she remained hesitant. What if it doesn't work out? What if we fight again? Then we'll talk and find another solution, one step at a time, Lily. The office door opened, and Julia came out, stopping abruptly when she saw her daughter in the hallway. For a long moment, mother and daughter just looked at each other, years of love, hurt, guilt, and longing condensed in that tense silence. Hi, sweetie, Julia finally said, her voice almost failing. Lily didn't respond immediately. Her eyes, always so firm, now revealed a vulnerability she rarely allowed herself to show. Are you going to work here? She asked at last. If you want, replied Julia, taking a small step forward. Mr. Oliver offered me a job and a place for us to stay. Another silence, less tense now. Are you still mad at me? Asked Lily, with the direct honesty of children. I was never mad at you, honey. I was desperate, scared, but never mad. And you? I was, admitted Lily. But now I don't know. It was a beginning. Not a complete reconciliation, but a door left ajar. Oliver, feeling that his presence was unnecessary at that moment, discreetly moved away, leaving mother and daughter with the space they needed to begin the long process of rebuilding their relationship. In the dining room, life continued. Customers came and went. Orders were placed, meals served. But in that small hallway, something important was happening. An old wound was slowly beginning to heal, and the People's Kitchen, which had started as a simple restaurant, took another step in its own transformation, becoming a place of welcome, of second chances, of new beginnings. May arrived, bringing constant rain to Riverdale. The days dawned grey with a fine drizzle that persisted until mid-afternoon, transforming the streets into improvised streams and forcing pedestrians to walk close to the walls of buildings, seeking some protection. At the People's Kitchen, the movement increased on these damp days. The heat emanating from the kitchen, the comforting aroma of home-cooked food, and the accessible price made the place even more attractive to workers seeking refuge from the inclement weather. In the small improvised apartment above the restaurant, Lily and Julia were adapting to the new routine. The space had been transformed with the help of all the employees. Walls were painted, colorful curtains installed. Simple but functional furniture was acquired. It wasn't luxurious, but it had the essentials. And most importantly, it was a place they could call home. The most important thing, it was safe. The relationship between mother and daughter, initially tense after the reunion, was beginning to find a new balance. There were difficult moments, when the past resurfaced in seemingly harmless comments or when everyday decisions rekindled old hurts. But there were also moments of genuine rapprochement. Julia learning to respect the independence her daughter had gained, Lily recognizing her mother's effort to provide a better life for both of them. "You look like your grandmother, you know," Julia commented one night while watching Lily meticulously organizing her school backpack for the next day. Lily looked up, surprised. Her maternal grandmother had passed away when she was only 6, but she kept vivid memories of the woman with rough hands and an easy smile who told stories about the countryside while preparing tapioca in the small kitchen. "How so?" "That way you do things, so neat, so organized. And that determined look, that doesn't accept being contradicted." Julia smiled, with a mixture of nostalgia and pride. She would have loved to see how you've grown. It was moments like these, brief and spontaneous, that were rebuilding the bridge between them. A sincere compliment, a shared memory, a small gesture of care. At the restaurant, Julia's presence brought subtle but significant changes. Her work as a cleaning assistant soon evolved into other responsibilities. It was discovered that she had a talent for organization and supplier relationships. In no time, she took control of the inventory and purchases, negotiating better prices and establishing partnerships with local producers. "You have a knack for business," commented Sam, impressed with the way Julia had managed to reduce ingredient expenses by almost 20% without compromising quality. "I learned from necessity," she replied simply. "When you count every penny to survive, you learn to do more with less." Meanwhile, Oliver was implementing broader changes at the People's Kitchen. The first was Lily's return to school. After a frank conversation with mother and daughter, and with the help of Henry, the lawyer who frequented the restaurant, he managed to enroll the girl at Franklin Elementary School, a few blocks away. He also arranged for tutoring, so that she could catch up on the content she had missed during the period she was away. "You can continue helping at the restaurant," he explained to Lily, who showed reluctance to return to studies, "but only a few hours a day after school. Your priority now is to study." Reluctantly, Lily accepted the new arrangement. However, to everyone's surprise, she quickly adapted to the school routine. Her Portuguese teacher, Deborah, immediately recognized the student's potential and began encouraging her to write short stories. Lily, who had always observed the world with curious eyes, found in writing a way to process her experiences. "Look what I wrote today," she showed Oliver one afternoon, extending a notebook where she had written an essay on the place where I live. Oliver read the text attentively, where Lily described the People's Kitchen not just as a restaurant, but as a space of encounters, stories, and possibilities. The sensitivity with which she captured details, Mrs. Nancy's tired smile at the end of the day, Clayton's calloused hands cutting vegetables, Sam's attentive gaze counting the cash, revealed an astute observer of the human condition. "This is very good, Lily," he praised, genuinely impressed. You have a gift for storytelling." The girl's face lit up with the praise. It was rare to see her showing joy so openly. It was during this time that Oliver began to implement more structural changes in the restaurant. The backspace, previously used only for storage, was reorganized to house a small library and study room. Books donated by customers and friends filled the improvised shelves. Tables and chairs were installed, and a blackboard was hung on the wall. "What's the idea?" asked Mrs. Nancy, curious about the transformation of the space. "A place for neighborhood children to study after school," explained Oliver. "Many don't have an adequate space at home with proper lighting and quiet. Here they can do homework, receive help with difficult subjects, have access to books." The idea emerged after Oliver observed how Lily struggled to do her school assignments in the small apartment, often interrupted by external noises or the lack of adequate material. But it wasn't just for her. It was for all the children who, like Lily, just needed an opportunity to develop their potential. The project started modestly. Lily invited some classmates, who soon brought other friends. Deborah, the Portuguese teacher, offered to give tutoring classes twice a week after her hours at school. An engineering student from Riverdale State University, a loyal customer of the restaurant, volunteered to teach mathematics on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Soon the space was always full on weekday afternoons. Children of different ages, all from the neighborhood, found there not only academic help, but also a safe and welcoming environment. Oliver implemented a simple system. Whoever came to study received a free snack, a sandwich and juice, lovingly prepared by Mrs. Nancy. "Don't you think you're spending too much on this project?" questioned Sam, concerned about the restaurant's finances. "Free food, school supplies, volunteer teachers who also eat here. Consider it an investment," replied Oliver with an enigmatic smile. "The return isn't immediate or financial, but it's certain." What Sam and the other employees didn't know was that Oliver personally financed a large part of those initiatives. The money came from his personal savings, accumulated during years of work in the family's hotel chain. For him, it was a much more satisfying way to use those resources than on any luxury he could buy for himself. With the success of the educational space, other ideas began to emerge. Julia suggested the creation of a basic cooking course for unemployed adults. Mrs. Nancy promptly offered to teach. "Many people in the neighborhood can't get jobs due to lack of qualifications," argued Julia. "With basic cooking skills, they can work in restaurants, buffets, even set up small businesses at home." The first class, composed of 10 women from the community, began in June. The classes took place at night, after the restaurant closed, using the kitchen itself as a learning space. Oliver secured donations of ingredients from partner suppliers, ensuring that the course could be offered for free. The impact of these initiatives in the neighborhood was almost immediate. The People's Kitchen was no longer just a restaurant, but became a community reference point. People who previously just had lunch there quickly now spent more time, talked, exchanged ideas and experiences. An informal support network began to form. Customers offered jobs to other customers, shared information about opportunities, helped each other in times of difficulty. All this movement didn't go unnoticed in the city. A reporter from the local newspaper, intrigued by the comments he heard about the restaurant that became a school, appeared one afternoon to check it out personally. He was impressed with what he found and, the following week, published a full-page article about the work developed at the People's Kitchen. "Much more than feeding the body, restaurant in downtown Riverdale transforms lives through education and solidarity," said the headline. The report highlighted Lily's story, without revealing sensitive details, such as her running away from home. It focused on how she had found not only work at the restaurant, but also the opportunity to continue her studies and develop her talent for writing. It also mentioned the cooking classes for adults and the already visible results. 2 students from the first class had secured jobs at a hotel in the city. The day after the publication, the movement in the restaurant doubled. People from different parts of the city appeared, curious to know the place that was featured in the newspaper pages. Some came just to eat, others brought donations, books, school supplies, even a used computer offered by a local businessman. "I didn't expect all this repercussion," commented Oliver to Julia as they observed the packed dining room. "People like stories of hope," she replied, with the practical wisdom that characterized her. "In such a difficult world, knowing that a place like this exists gives courage to continue." The unexpected publicity also brought new challenges. The physical space of the restaurant no longer comfortably accommodated all activities. The tutoring classes and the cooking course often competed for the same time and environment. It was necessary to expand. That's when Oliver decided to take a bolder step. There was a property for sale next to the restaurant, an old fabric store that had closed months ago. The building needed renovations, but the location was perfect for the expansion of the People's Kitchen's social activities. The purchase would require a significant investment, more than his personal savings could cover without raising suspicions. It would be necessary to resort to family resources, and that meant revealing, at least partially, where he was and what he was doing. On a rainy night in July, after closing the restaurant, Oliver finally made the call he had been postponing. "Marlene, it's Oliver. I need your help." The surprise in his sister's voice was evident. It had been almost 2 months since they had spoken, since the last time she had tried unsuccessfully to convince him to return to San Francisco and resume his responsibilities in the family business. "What happened? Are you okay?" she asked, the concern showing beneath the formal tone. "I'm great. In fact, I've never been better," he replied, with a sincerity that surprised them both. "But I need your help for an important project." In the next 2 hours, Oliver explained in detail the work he had been developing at the People's Kitchen. He talked about Lily and Julia, about the tutoring classes and the cooking course, about the expansion plans. He also talked for the first time in a long time about how he felt, the purpose he had found, the feeling of finally doing something meaningful. Marlene listened in silence, interrupting only to ask specific questions. When Oliver finished, there was a long pause on the line. "So that's what you've been doing all this time," she finally said, "building a social project while I deal with lawyers, administrative boards, and dissatisfied shareholders." There was a hint of resentment in her voice, but also something else, perhaps admiration, perhaps envy. "I needed to find my own way, Marlene," replied Oliver gently. "After Claire was gone, nothing made sense anymore in the world we had built. The hotels, the meetings, the profits, everything seemed empty. And now you've found meaning serving food to workers and giving classes to underprivileged children?" The ironic tone couldn't completely mask the genuine curiosity. "It's not just that. It's about creating possibilities, opening doors that were closed. It's about seeing in the eyes of a child like Lily the same spark I had when I started working with Dad. It's about feeling that I'm making a difference, not just accumulating zeros in a bank account." Another silence, longer this time. "How much do you need to buy the property next door?" asked Marlene finally. Oliver mentioned the amount, explaining that he intended to use part of his shares in the company and perhaps a personal loan. "Don't be ridiculous," cut Marlene. "I can release that amount from the company's social investment fund. It will be the first project of the Claire Mendoza Foundation, if you agree with the name, of course." The mention of his late wife's name caught Oliver off guard. A wave of emotion hit him, and for a moment he couldn't respond. "Marlene, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," she replied, her voice softer now. "Just promise that you'll let me visit this place. I want to meet this famous Lily and see with my own eyes what my brother has been doing with the family money." There was a tone of playfulness in her words, but also an implicit reconciliation, an acceptance of the path Oliver had chosen. "It will be a pleasure to have you," he replied, feeling as if an enormous weight had been removed from his shoulders. "And I'm sure you'll fall in love with this place just as I have." As he hung up the phone, Oliver looked out the office window at the rain that continued to fall outside. The drops formed complex patterns on the glass, dissolving and reconfiguring themselves constantly, like the lives that intertwined in that small restaurant in the center of Riverdale. Outside the office, without Oliver noticing, Lily had stopped to tie her shoelace and had heard fragments of the conversation. Not enough to understand all the details, but enough to understand that her Mr. Oliver wasn't exactly who everyone thought. The revelation left her confused and intrigued. Who was, after all, the man who had transformed her life? And why would someone with so much money choose to live there, among simple people managing a popular restaurant? With these questions echoing in her mind, Lily silently climbed the stairs to the small apartment where her mother was already asleep. The story notebook, which she now carried everywhere, weighed in her backpack, full of new ideas and possibilities. If this story has interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like Tell us what city you're watching from, and we'll continue. The arrival of August brought with it the strong winds that announced the end of the rainy season in Riverdale. Mornings now dawned with a clear sky and a sun that quickly warmed the city streets. At the People's Kitchen, the routine had adjusted to the new dimensions the project was taking. Renovations on the neighboring building were underway, creating a constant movement of masons, electricians, and painters who mingled with the regular customers, sharing tables during lunch hours. Oliver had hired a small local construction company to make the necessary adaptations. The project, developed by an architect friend of Henry's, included the creation of 3 classrooms, a larger library, a basic computer lab, and an industrial kitchen for the cooking courses. The plan was to inaugurate the space in October, with a big celebration for the community. "We need a new name," Julia commented while reviewing the renovation cost spreadsheets with Oliver. "People's Kitchen no longer represents everything we do here." Oliver agreed. The restaurant had transformed into something much larger than a simple commercial establishment. It was now a community center, an educational space, a meeting point, and support for dozens of families in the neighborhood. "Do you have any suggestions?" he asked, curious to hear Julia's opinion, who increasingly became his partner in managing the project. "I've been thinking of something like Hope Community Center," she replied, testing the name aloud, "or simply Hope Space, something that conveys what we really do here, give people hope." The name immediately resonated with Oliver. Hope was exactly what that place represented, for Lily, for Julia, for the children who attended the tutoring classes, for the women who learned new skills in the cooking course. And he had to admit for himself as well. "It's perfect," he agreed. "I'll arrange for the new name to be registered and start the transition in the visual identity." While the renovation progressed and plans for the future took shape, Lily was facing her own challenges. School, which had initially been a difficult adaptation, had now become a space of discovery and recognition. Her English teacher, Deborah, had entered one of her essays in a state competition for young writers without telling her. When the result was announced, Lily placed second in the children's category, with a text about life on the streets of Riverdale, narrated from the perspective of a girl invisible to society's eyes. "I can't believe you did this," complained Lily, when Deborah showed her the certificate and the prize, a gift card to a local bookstore. "These stories weren't meant for anyone to read." The teacher smiled, understanding. "Lily, you have a gift. Your way of observing the world, of capturing the details that no one else sees, of giving voice to those who are usually not heard. That's rare, and it needs to be shared." Deep down, despite the initial embarrassment, Lily felt a silent pride that her work had been recognized. When she showed the certificate to her mother and Oliver, she tried to appear indifferent, but couldn't completely hide the satisfaction in her eyes. "We're going to frame this and put it on the restaurant wall," declared Oliver, while reading the honorable mention that accompanied the prize. "No way," protested Lily, horrified at the idea. "It's bad enough that Miss Deborah told the entire school." Julia and Oliver exchanged knowing smiles about the girl's shyness. It was good to see her acting like a normal teenager, concerned with her classmates' opinions instead of the small adult she had needed to be for so long. It was that same week that Lily's past resurfaced unexpectedly. An ordinary Tuesday, moderate movement in the restaurant. Clayton was the first to notice the man who entered and sat at a table in the corner, ordering only coffee. Tall, thin, with stubble and restless eyes that constantly scanned the environment as if looking for someone. "There's a strange guy at table 7, Clayton commented to Sam while organizing the orders. "He's been there for half an hour, just had a coffee, and keeps looking at the kitchen." Sam shrugged. "He must be waiting for someone, or doesn't have money to order anything else." The man remained there for another hour until Lily emerged from the kitchen, carrying a tray with empty plates. Upon seeing her, he abruptly stood up, knocking over the chair behind him. "Beatrice, it's really you!" he exclaimed, loud enough to attract the attention of everyone in the room. Lily froze in place, the tray trembling in her hands. Her face lost its color, and for a moment it seemed she would faint. Clayton quickly approached, taking the tray from her hands before the plates fell. "Do you know this man, Lily?" he asked, concerned about the girl's reaction. She didn't answer, her eyes fixed on the stranger who was now approaching with determined steps. "Of course she knows me," replied the man, opening a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Richard, her father, And I've been looking for my daughter for a long time. The declaration fell like a bomb in the silent restaurant. Everyone knew Lily's story, or at least parts of it. They knew she lived with her mother in the apartment above the restaurant, that she had spent time on the streets before finding the People's Kitchen. But no one had ever mentioned a father. It was Mrs. Nancy who reacted first. Coming out of the kitchen upon hearing the commotion, she protectively placed herself beside Lily. "The girl is working now," she said, in a tone that admitted no contestation. "If you want to talk to her, you'll have to wait for the appropriate time, and with her mother's authorization." Richard narrowed his eyes, visibly irritated by the interference. "I don't need authorization to speak with my own daughter. Where is Julia? I need to have a conversation with her too." The mention of Julia's name finally seemed to wake Lily from her state of shock. "You are not my father," she said, in a low but firm voice. "You never were. A father is someone who raises you, who is present." The words hit Richard like a slap. His face contorted in an expression of barely contained anger. "Watch how you talk to me, girl. I am your father. I even have a document that proves it, and I came here to take you home." "My home is here," replied Lily, taking a step back, closer to Mrs. Nancy. "With my mother." At that moment, Oliver emerged from the office, alerted by Sam about the confusion in the dining room. He approached calmly, assessing the situation with experienced eyes. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked, positioning himself between Richard and Lily. "And who are you?" questioned Richard, sizing Oliver up with a suspicious look. "Oliver Mendoza, owner of this establishment," he replied, with a calm that contrasted with the tension in the air. "And you're disrupting the environment." Oliver's full name, rarely mentioned in the day-to-day of the restaurant, didn't seem to mean anything to Richard. "I don't want trouble," he replied, raising his hands in a conciliatory gesture that didn't match the hostility in his eyes. "I just came to get my daughter. It's my right." "A right you abandoned how long ago?" 7 years. Julia's voice cut across the room. She had just entered through the main door, returning from a visit to suppliers. Her eyes, normally calm, now sparkled with indignation. "What do you want here, Richard?" The man turned to face her, a crooked smile on his lips. "Missed you too, Julia," he replied with irony. "I came to get our daughter. I have a stable life now, a steady job in Jersey City. Beatrice will have everything she needs with me." "Lily," corrected the girl automatically. "Nobody calls me Beatrice." Richard ignored the interruption. "I got joint custody. I have the documents right here." He took a crumpled envelope from his pocket and waved it in the air. "Half the year she stays with me, half with you. It's the law." Julia paled. "That's a lie. There was no process." "Yes, there was. You weren't notified because you changed addresses without telling anyone," replied Richard with a triumphant smile. "The judge granted joint custody in your absence. It's all here, stamped and signed." Oliver noticed the growing panic in Julia's eyes and intervened again. "I think we should continue this conversation in private," he suggested, indicating the office. "Lily, why don't you go help Mrs. Nancy in the kitchen while we talk to Mr. Richard?" Lily hesitated, the fear evident on her face. "I don't want to go with him, Mr. Oliver," she whispered, clinging to his sleeve. "Please, don't let him take me." "No one is going to take you anywhere against your will," assured Oliver, with a conviction that momentarily calmed the girl. "Trust me, go with Mrs. Nancy now." Reluctantly, Lily allowed the cook to lead her to the back of the restaurant. When they were out of sight, Oliver turned to Richard. "Now we can see these documents you mentioned," he said, maintaining a professional tone that masked his growing distrust. In the office, with the door closed, Richard finally handed the envelope to Julia. She opened it with trembling hands and examined the papers contained within. After a few minutes of tense silence, she looked up, a mixture of relief and indignation on her face. "This is not a court order," she said, handing the documents to Oliver. "It's just an initial petition, a request for custody that you filed with the court. There's no decision here." Oliver examined the papers and confirmed Julia's observation. "She's right. This is just the beginning of a process, not a decision. And from what I see here, the hearing is scheduled for 2 weeks from now." Richard's bluff had been discovered. His face contorted in an expression of frustrated anger. "It doesn't matter. I'll get custody anyway. I have my own house now, a stable job. And you, Julia, Living on charity above a restaurant? It's not charity, she replied, regaining her composure. I work here, receive a fair salary, and our daughter is studying at a good school, has friends, is happy. What can you offer that's better than this? A father, replied Richard simply. Every child needs a father. A father who was never present? Questioned Julia. Who never paid a month of child support, who didn't even remember his own daughter's birthday. The discussion continued for a few minutes, with accusations from both sides. Oliver observed in silence, evaluating the situation. There was something in Richard's sudden insistence on assuming paternity that didn't seem sincere. It was as if there was a hidden motive behind his sudden interest in Lily. Why now? He finally asked, interrupting the clash between the ex-partners. Why, after so many years, did you decide to look for your daughter precisely now? The question caught Richard off guard. He hesitated for a moment before responding with an indignation that sounded rehearsed. Because it's my right. Because I miss her. Because I want to be a real father now that I have the means. Curious, commented Oliver, maintaining a casual tone that contrasted with the intensity of his gaze. Because from what I understand, you didn't show this interest until 2 weeks ago, when that article came out in the local newspaper about the work we do here. An article that mentioned Lily as one of the children benefiting from the project. Richard's face slightly flushed, confirming Oliver's suspicion. I saw the article by chance, he admitted, averting his gaze. That's how I discovered where Beatrice was. But that doesn't change anything. I'm still her father. And the Claire Mendoza Foundation also has nothing to do with your sudden interest in being a father, insisted Oliver. The foundation that was mentioned in the same article as the financier of the expansion project? Julia looked from Richard to Oliver, confused by the direction the conversation was taking. What are you talking about, Oliver? I'm talking about money, Julia, he replied, without taking his eyes off Richard. The Claire Mendoza Foundation is an institution with considerable resources, and I suspect that Mr. Richard's sudden interest in his daughter has more to do with those resources than with paternal feelings. Richard abruptly stood up, the chair scraping forcefully on the floor. I don't have to listen to these accusations. I came here for my rights as a father, and I will exercise them, whether you like it or not. Your rights will be decided by a judge, replied Oliver calmly, and I suggest you prepare well for that hearing because Julia won't be alone. Are you threatening me? Questioned Richard, leaning over the desk. Not at all, replied Oliver, just informing you that Julia will have the best legal assistance possible. Henry Tavares, one of the most respected lawyers in the city, is already aware of the situation and will represent her and Lily's interests. The name Henry Tavares had a visible impact on Richard. The lawyer was known for his competence and for his close relationship with local judges and prosecutors. This changes nothing, he insisted, but his tone no longer had the same confidence. I have my rights. You do, agreed Oliver, and Lily has hers, including the right to be heard in court to express who she wishes to live with, and believe me, Mr. Richard, she will be heard. With these words, Oliver stood up, indicating that the meeting was over. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a restaurant to manage. You can contact Julia's lawyer for any future communications. Richard left the office visibly irritated, but without making more threats. In the dining room, he cast a final glance in the direction of the kitchen, where Lily remained hidden and left the restaurant. When the door closed behind him, Julia collapsed in the chair, her hands covering her face. He's going to succeed, isn't he? She asked, her voice choked with fear. He has a stable job, a house, while you are a dedicated mother who works honestly and provides a safe and loving environment for your daughter, completed Oliver, sitting beside her. No sensible judge would give custody of Lily to a father who was absent for 7 years and suddenly appears with questionable interest. Julia looked up, surprised by Oliver's confidence. How can you be so sure? And who is this Henry Tavares you mentioned? I can't afford a lawyer. Henry is a friend, replied Oliver, with a slight smile. A good friend, who happens to be a specialist in family law. And as for the costs, don't worry. The Claire Mendoza Foundation will cover everything. This foundation, it's yours, isn't it? Asked Julia, finally putting the pieces of the puzzle together. That's why Richard got so interested when you mentioned it. Oliver nodded, seeing no reason to deny the obvious. It's a foundation I created in memory of my wife, and yes, it has sufficient resources to support causes like yours. So you're not just a restaurant manager, concluded Julia, with a look that mixed surprise and a new understanding. No, admitted Oliver, but that's a story for another time. Now we need to talk to Lily. She must be terrified. In the kitchen, they found Lily sitting on a small stool, her arms crossed in a protective embrace, while Mrs. Nancy tried, unsuccessfully, to distract her with a recipe for cornbread. Upon seeing her mother and Oliver, the girl jumped up. "Is he gone?" she asked, anxiety evident in every word. "You're not going to let him take me, are you, Mom?" Julia hugged her daughter tightly. "Never, my darling. You stay with me, always." Oliver observed the scene with a lump in his throat. In his mind, the image of Claire, his wife, and the family, they never could have appeared. The disease that took her had been cruel and swift, leaving behind only unrealized dreams and a void that seemed impossible to fill. Until, unexpectedly, he found a new purpose at the People's Kitchen, in Lily, in Julia, in all the lives that now intertwined with his. "We'll face this together," he promised, placing a hand on Lily's shoulder. "Trust me." The girl looked up, her eyes still teary, but with a renewed sparkle of hope. "I trust you, Mr. Oliver," she replied, with a simplicity that said it all. That night, after the restaurant closed and everyone went home, Oliver remained alone in the office, planning the next steps. Richard's threat was real, but not insurmountable. He picked up the phone and dialed Henry Tavares's number. "Henry, it's Oliver. Remember that situation I mentioned about Lily? We need to act now. The biological father showed up today and is claiming custody." On the other end of the line, the lawyer listened attentively as Oliver explained the details of the situation. "I understand," he said when Oliver finished. "We'll need evidence of abandonment, witnesses of the girl's current well-being, and most importantly, prepare Lily to speak to the judge. The clearer her preference to stay with her mother is, the stronger our case will be." "Do whatever is necessary," replied Oliver, "and send all expenses to the foundation." After hanging up, Oliver remained seated, contemplating the silence of the empty restaurant. Outside, the night in Riverdale pulsed with its own life. Somewhere Richard was probably planning his next move, and in the small apartment above the restaurant, Lily might be awake, haunted by the ghost of a father who had never been present, and now threatened to tear away her newly conquered stability. "I won't allow it," murmured Oliver to himself, with a determination he hadn't felt since the days when he fought to expand the family's hotel chain. "Not this time." With that thought, he turned off the office lights and walked home, where an important call awaited him. It was time for Marlene to know exactly what was happening in Riverdale and how the Claire Mendoza Foundation could make a difference in the life of a small family that had unexpectedly become so important to him. The 2 weeks leading up to the custody hearing were intense at the People's Kitchen. Henry Tavares, with the discreet efficiency that characterized him, gathered an impressive dossier. Statements from Lily's school teachers attesting to her good performance after her enrollment. Psychological reports highlighting the importance of the recently conquered emotional stability. Testimonies from restaurant employees and customers about the healthy relationship between mother and daughter. Documents proving paternal abandonment for years, including the lack of child support. Payments. While the expansion works continued in the building next door, another type of construction was happening behind the scenes. The meticulous preparation of Julia and Lily's defense against Richard's claims. "We are well prepared," Henry assured Julia on the eve of the hearing, "but the most important thing will be Lily's testimony. She needs to be confident about what she will say to the judge." The girl who had heard the conversation, sitting in a corner of the office, looked up from the notebook where she was writing. "I know exactly what I'm going to say," she affirmed, with a seriousness that didn't match her 12 years. "I'm going to tell the truth." Lily's determination impressed everyone. Since Richard's reappearance, she seemed to have matured even more, as if the threat to her newly conquered stability had awakened an even greater inner strength. "I'm just afraid the judge won't believe me," she confessed to Oliver later that day, while helping him organize the shelves of the small library. "Adults sometimes don't really listen to children." Oliver put the book he was holding back on the shelf and crouched down to be at her eye level. "Lily, do you know what impresses people the most? The truth told with conviction. You don't need to memorize answers or try to guess what the judge wants to hear. Just tell your story in your own way. That night, while everyone prepared for the decisive day that would follow, an unexpected visitor arrived at the already closed restaurant. Marlene Mendoza, with her elegant bearing and scrutinizing gaze, seemed out of place in the simple environment of the People's Kitchen. But there was in her eyes a genuine curiosity, a sincere desire to understand what had attracted her brother to that place. "So this is where you've been hiding all this time," she commented, as Oliver guided her through the empty space. "I must admit it's different from what I imagined." "And what did you imagine?" asked Oliver with a slight smile. "Something more miserable, to be honest," replied Marlene, with the frankness that had always characterized the relationship between the siblings. "But this place has charm. A peculiar charm, it's true, but undeniable." Oliver laughed, not offended. He knew his sister well, always direct, always honest, even when honesty hurt a little. "Come, I want to show you the renovations." As they walked through the building under renovation, Oliver explained in detail the project being implemented, the classrooms that would receive children for tutoring, the industrial kitchen where professional courses would be taught, the expanded library with space for reading and computers. "And all this came from that small restaurant?" asked Marlene, impressed with the dimension of what was being built. "No," replied Oliver after a moment of reflection. "It came from a question asked by a 12-year-old girl on an ordinary morning." It was then that Oliver told the complete story, how Lily had arrived at the People's Kitchen, her simple proposal to work in exchange for food, how that encounter had awakened in him a purpose he thought he had lost forever after Claire's death. "She taught me about dignity," he explained, as they climbed to the apartment where Julia and Lily lived, now empty as both had gone out for the final preparations for the hearing, about finding strength where there seems to be no hope, about rebuilding life with your own hands regardless of the circumstances. Marlene observed the small apartment, simple but impeccably organized. On a table in the corner, several notebooks were stacked with the inscription "Lily's Stories" on the cover. "She writes?" she asked, carefully leafing through one of the notebooks. "Very well, in fact," replied Oliver, with evident pride. "She recently won a state prize. She has a natural talent for capturing the small truths that most people don't see." Marlene read a few paragraphs in silence, her face gradually changing expression. "This is extraordinary for someone so young," she finally admitted. "I can understand why you became so attached to this girl." Returning to the restaurant, the siblings sat at a table in the corner, where Clayton had left a prepared coffee before leaving. "So, this Richard really has a chance of getting custody?" asked Marlene, after Oliver explained the legal situation they were facing. "Legally, he's the biological father, and that carries weight," replied Oliver, concern evident in his voice. "But Henry is good at what he does, and we have substantial evidence of the previous abandonment. Besides, Lily is already old enough for her opinion to be considered by the judge." "And what's plan B?" questioned Marlene, always practical. "If, for some reason, the decision is unfavorable." Oliver didn't respond immediately. It was a possibility he tried not to consider, but that was never completely absent from his thoughts. "I don't know yet," he finally admitted. "But I won't give up on them, Marlene. I can't." His sister observed him attentively, recognizing in her brother a determination she hadn't seen since the days when he and Claire dreamed of their own family. "You really found your place here, didn't you?" she stated, without judgment in her voice. "This restaurant, these people, they've become your family." Oliver nodded without words to express what he felt, how to explain that the emptiness left by Claire's death, which seemed impossible to fill in the antiseptic meeting rooms and luxurious corridors of the hotels, was slowly being occupied by the buzz of studying children, by the aroma of home-cooked food, by the smiles of recognition from regular customers. "Claire would have loved this place," said Marlene, breaking the silence. "She would have understood exactly why you chose to stay." Marlene's words touched Oliver deeply. It was the first time his sister had spoken of Claire without that veiled accusation, as if Oliver's wife's death had been a selfish decision that had taken him away from his responsibilities. "Thank you for saying that," he replied, his voice slightly choked. "It means a lot." Marlene smiled, a genuine smile that softened her always so controlled features. "So, little brother, what can I do to help tomorrow? Because I didn't come all the way to this backwater just to appreciate the local cuisine. The next morning, the Riverdale courthouse was busy as usual. In the corridor leading to the hearing room, Julia nervously waited. Wearing the only formal outfit she owned, a black skirt and a simple white blouse, purchased especially for the occasion. At her side, Lily wore her impeccably ironed school uniform, her curly hair tied in an organized ponytail. "Remember," instructed Henry for the last time, "answer only what is asked, be honest, and don't be afraid to say how you feel. Judge Campos is known for taking minors' opinions seriously, especially in custody cases." Lily nodded, squeezing her mother's hand tightly. Across the corridor, Richard conversed in a low voice with his lawyer, a young man with a suit slightly too big for his thin body. Occasionally, he cast glances in Julia and Lily's direction, as if assessing his chances. Oliver arrived a few minutes before the hearing was called, accompanied by Marlene. The elegant presence of the woman, with her perfectly tailored suit and impeccable posture, caused an immediate impact in the environment. Richard especially seemed uncomfortable with the arrival of the duo. "Who is she?" asked Lily to Julia, curious about the woman accompanying Oliver. "His sister," replied Julia, who had been briefly introduced to Marlene the night before. "It seems she came from San Francisco especially for the hearing." Before they could talk more, the door of the room opened, and the court officer called the names of Julia and Richard. It was time. The hearing proceeded more quickly than everyone expected. Judge Campos, a middle-aged man with attentive eyes behind thin-framed glasses, conducted the procedure with respectful efficiency. He first heard the initial arguments from both lawyers, then called Julia and Richard individually for their testimonies. Julia spoke with the honest simplicity that characterized her. She didn't try to demonize Richard, just reported the facts. The abandonment when Lily was 5 years old, the complete absence of contact or financial support, the difficulties she faced alone, the recent stability gained at the People's Kitchen. Richard, in turn, presented his version. He claimed that Julia made it difficult for him to access his daughter, that he always tried to maintain contact but was prevented, that now he had the conditions to offer an adequate home and wanted to exercise his right as a father. When it was Lily's turn, the judge requested that only she and the lawyers remain in the room, a common practice to ensure that the child could speak freely without the pressure of the parents' presence. "Beatrice," began the judge with a gentle voice, "I know this situation must be difficult for you, but I need to know in your own words how you feel about living with your mother or with your father." Lily took a deep breath, her hands slightly trembling in her lap. Then, with a clarity that surprised even Henry, she began to speak. "My name is Lily, Your Honor," she corrected politely. "Beatrice is what's on the documents, but no one calls me that except him." She paused briefly, organizing her thoughts. "I don't really know my father. I have some memories of him from when I was very little, but they're few and confused. What I do know is that I grew up watching my mother work 2, sometimes 3 jobs so that we would never lack food on our table. I saw her cry in hiding when she thought I was asleep, worried about the late rent. I saw her divide her own food with me when there wasn't enough for both of us." The room was in complete silence, everyone absorbed by the maturity with which the girl expressed herself. "I never received a phone call from him on my birthday. I never got a Christmas present. I never had help with homework or someone to go to school meetings besides my mother. And now he shows up, wanting to be my father, just because we're finally doing well. Just because we have a safe place to live and people who care about us." Her voice trembled slightly, but she quickly composed herself. "I don't want to go with him, Your Honor. I'm happy where I am. I have friends at school. I'm learning to cook with Mrs. Nancy. I write stories that my teacher Deborah says are good. For the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid of tomorrow." Judge Campos nodded, making some notes. "And what if your father has really changed, Lily? If he is sincerely sorry and wants to be part of your life now?" The question was difficult, but Lily's answer came without hesitation. "Then he can show that gradually without trying to tear me away from my mother. He can start by visiting, getting to know who I am now, not who he thinks I should be." When the hearing resumed with everyone present, Judge Campos didn't take long to pronounce his decision. Based on the documents presented, the testimonies heard, and mainly considering the best interest of the child, he maintained sole custody with Julia. He determined, however, that Richard would have the right to supervised visits every 2 weeks if he demonstrated interest, and established the payment of retroactive child support, considering the years of abandonment. This court understands that the minor's emotional stability must be prioritized, declared the judge. The bond with the mother is evident and healthy, and the child demonstrates that she is thriving in the current environment. As for the father, he will have the opportunity to gradually rebuild his relationship with his daughter, if that is his genuine desire. Upon hearing the decision, Julia covered her face with her hands, tears of relief silently streaming down. Lily, at her side, remained firm, but her body finally relaxed from the tension she had been carrying for weeks. On the other side of the room, Richard received the news with a closed expression, exchanging quick and irritated words with his lawyer. Leaving the courthouse, Oliver, Marlene, Julia, and Lily were received by a small crowd anxiously waiting in the lobby. Mrs. Nancy, Sam, Clayton, and several other employees and friends of the People's Kitchen had left their obligations to show support. The news of the victory was received with hugs, tears, and promises of a special celebration that night. As everyone headed to the restaurant, Oliver noticed Richard leaving alone, his posture defeated without looking back. For a moment, he felt a pang of compassion for the man who had lost the opportunity to know the extraordinary person his daughter was becoming. But the feeling soon gave way to a renewed certainty. Destiny sometimes has strange ways of forming families, uniting people not by blood, but by the invisible bonds of affection, respect, and solidarity. 3 months passed since the hearing. The old People's Kitchen, now officially renamed Hope Space, was preparing for its formal inauguration. The works on the annexed building had been completed, and the result exceeded the most optimistic expectations. The classrooms were equipped with new desks, whiteboards, and even some computers donated by local companies. The library, spacious and airy, had a modest but growing collection, including a special section dedicated to children's literature. The industrial kitchen shone with modern equipment, ready to receive students from the regional gastronomy course. At the center of it all, the restaurant continued to function, now with an expanded menu and a larger team. Julia had been promoted to administrative manager, coordinating the entire operation with the pragmatic efficiency that had always characterized her. Mrs. Nancy, in addition to continuing as head cook, was now also the main instructor of the cooking course, proudly sharing the secrets of her famous seasonings. Lily, in turn, was flourishing in multiple directions. At school, she had become one of the best students in her class, especially in English and history. Her stories, increasingly sophisticated, began to circulate beyond the school walls. One of them was published in the cultural supplement of the local newspaper, generating a small local celebrity. At Hope Space, she had taken on the responsibility of coordinating a reading club for younger children, sharing her love for books. Richard, surprisingly, had complied with the court order. He appeared punctually every 2 weeks for his supervised visits, always bringing small gifts and showing a genuine interest in getting to know his daughter. The first visits were tense and filled with uncomfortable silences, but gradually, father and daughter began to build a possible relationship. Not that of father and daughter in the traditional sense, perhaps, but of two people connected by the past and trying to find a path to the future. On the eve of the official inauguration, while the final preparations were being finalized, Oliver found Lily sitting alone in the new library, writing in her inseparable blue notebook. "Working on a new story?" he asked, sitting beside her. Lily smiled, partially closing the notebook. "Kind of. It's different this time." "Different how?" "It's our story," she replied, after a moment of hesitation. "The story of the People's Kitchen, of how it all began, of how we got here. I thought it would be important to record so that people don't forget in the future." Oliver felt a lump in his throat. "Can I read a bit?" Lily hesitated for an instant, then pushed the notebook in his direction. "Just the beginning. The rest isn't ready yet." Oliver opened the notebook and began to read. The first page contained only one sentence, written in Lily's careful handwriting. "This is the story of how a simple question can change many lives." "What question?" asked Oliver, although he already suspected the answer. "Can I wash those dishes in exchange for a plate of food?" recited Lily from memory. "It was the first thing I said to you, remember?" How could he forget? That simple phrase, pronounced with dignity by a child who had every right to feel defeated by life, had completely redesigned the course of his existence. "I remember perfectly," he replied, returning the notebook to her. "And I'm eager to read the rest of the story when it's ready." The next day, Hope Space filled with people for the inauguration ceremony. Local authorities, journalists, representatives of schools and partner institutions, as well as loyal customers and the neighborhood community, all gathered to celebrate what many already called a small miracle in downtown Riverdale. Marlene, who had returned especially for the occasion, observed with evident pride her brother receiving the guests. At her side, Henry Tavares, who besides being a lawyer had become a close friend and advisor to the project, commented on the positive impact the initiative was already having on the community. The most awaited moment of the ceremony was the official inauguration speech. To the surprise of many, it wasn't Oliver who climbed to the small improvised podium, but Lily, wearing a white blouse and a blue skirt, her curly hair loose framing her determined face. She seemed much older than her 12 years. "6 months ago, I was sitting on a wall across the street, observing this restaurant," she began, her voice initially timid, gaining strength as she proceeded. "I was hungry, but more than that, I was alone. I didn't have a place to call my own. I wasn't sure about tomorrow. What I didn't know is that, by crossing that street and asking a simple question, I would be starting a story much bigger than I could imagine." The audience listened in respectful silence, many with teary eyes. Hope Space isn't just a pretty name. It's a promise. The promise that no one needs to face their struggles alone, that everyone deserves a chance, a place at the table, an opportunity to show their worth. That dignity isn't a privilege, but a right. Lily paused, seeking with her eyes her mother in the audience, then Mrs. Nancy, Sam, Clayton, and finally, Oliver. "Some people say we were lucky, that it was a coincidence that I chose this restaurant, that I found these people. But I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in encounters, in moments when our stories intersect and create something new, something bigger than each of us individually." Her words, simple but profound, perfectly captured the spirit of what they had built together. It wasn't just a restaurant with a social project attached. It was a space of transformation, where lives were rewritten, where new possibilities were born every day. So, in officially declaring Hope Space inaugurated, I want to thank everyone who has been part of this journey and invite each of you to write with us the next chapters of this story, because it's just beginning. The applause that followed was enthusiastic and emotional. Oliver, observing the scene from a discreet corner, felt inexplicably complete. The emptiness that Claire's departure had left would never be totally filled. Some spaces in the heart remained sacred in absence. But around him, a new family had formed, woven with threads of compassion, mutual respect, everyday solidarity. As the inauguration celebration continued, with music, abundant food, and lively conversations, Oliver allowed himself a moment of silent reflection. He thought about how life sometimes takes us on unexpected paths, how devastating losses can, eventually, make room for new beginnings, how a simple question asked by a child can trigger profound transformations. "What are you thinking about?" asked Julia, approaching with 2 glasses of juice. "You seem far away from here." Oliver accepted the glass with a grateful smile. "I'm thinking about how strange is the path that brings us to where we need to be, even when we don't know that's where we should be." Julia nodded, understanding perfectly. Like a street girl who finds a restaurant, or a rich businessman who decides to serve popular food in Riverdale. Both laughed, complicit in recognizing the ironies of destiny. "What matters isn't how we got here," continued Julia, with the practical wisdom that always characterized her. "It's what we do from now on." And what they would do, Oliver knew, was continue building, day after day, a space where hope wasn't just a name on the facade, but a lived and shared reality. A place where simple questions could trigger profound transformations, where individual stories intertwined to form a larger, stronger, and more beautiful narrative than any of them could be in isolation. Across the room, Lily was chatting animatedly with a group of children, probably telling one of her stories, judging by the expressive gestures and the attentive faces of her small audience. Her face, once marked by distrust and fear, now radiated a serene confidence, the security of someone who had finally found her place in the world. And at that moment, observing the scene, Oliver knew with certainty that he had also found his.